This is Chapter 4, Module 3, Connective Tissue Proper and Membranes. The learning objectives of this module are 1. Name and classify the different types of connective tissue proper. 2. Visually recognize each connective tissue proper type from diagrams. And 3. Explain how epithelial and connective tissues combine to form 4 types of tissue membranes, and specify the functions of each. There are 2 categories of connective tissue proper with subcategories to each. Loose connective tissue and dense connective tissue are the 2 main categories. Loose connective tissue contains more ground substance and fewer fibers, while dense connective tissue contains more fibers and less ground substance. There are 3 types of loose connective tissues in adults: areolar, adipose, and reticular. As the name implies, loose connective tissue consists of a loosely woven mix of fibers, cells, and ground substance. Areolar is a name that means spaces. This tissue therefore possesses randomly arranged protein fibers with abundant intercellular spaces. Scattered within the spaces are the many different cell types of connective tissues, including fibroblasts, fibrocytes, adipocytes, mesenchymal cells, macrophages, mast cells, lymphocytes, microphages, and melanocytes. Areolar tissue provides an open framework of fibers surrounded by a viscous ground substance that holds blood vessels and capillary beds in places such as under the skin. It is strong enough to bind different tissue types together, yet soft enough to provide flexibility and cushioning. In identifying areolar tissue, you will see the many different cell types as well as all 3 of the protein fiber types. Adipose tissue is a loose connective tissue that contains many adipocytes, or fat cells. Adipocytes in adults do not divide. They can expand to store fat, or they can shrink when fats are released. In development, adipocytes can divide to produce more fat cells or when more storage is needed. The main role of adipose tissue is to store energy in the form of fat, although it also cushions and insulates the body. Adipose tissue is primarily located beneath the skin, but is also found around internal organs. In the integumentary system, which includes the skin, it accumulates in the deepest level, the subcutaneous level, providing insulation from heat and cold. Around organs, it provides protective padding. Reticular tissue is the 3rd type of loose connective tissue. Reticular tissue is named for the reticular fibers that are the main structural part of the tissue. The cells that make the reticular fibers are the fibroblasts, and these fibroblasts are called reticular cells. Reticular connective tissue forms scaffolding for other cells in several organs, including the liver, spleen, kidney, and lymph nodes. You will never see reticular connective tissue alone. There will always be other cells scattered among the reticular fibers. In identifying reticular tissue, you will see dark colored dots scattered along the reticular fibers. Dark colored dots attached to the reticular fibers are the cells that are either reticular cells or other functional cells. An example of this are lymphocytes that would be found in the reticular tissue of lymph nodes. The second category of connective tissue proper is dense connective tissue. In contrast to loose connective tissue, where protein fibers are small and less abundant, dense connective tissues possess large, robust fibers, giving these tissues considerable strength. Fibers are so numerous the extracellular matrix contains few, if any, open spaces where ground substance is visible. The absence of open spaces between cells or fibers is a key identifying trait of dense connective tissues. The orientation of these fibers is the basis for naming the different types of dense connective tissue. Also in dense connective tissues, there are fewer types of cells, the vast majority being fibroblasts or fibrocytes. Dense connective tissues contain either collagen or elastic protein fibers. Both dense regular connective tissue and dense irregular connective tissue contain collagen fibers, whereas elastic connective tissue contains elastic fibers. In dense regular connective tissue, the collagen fibers are densely packed and arranged in parallel. This type of tissue is found in ligaments and fascia. These structures are powerfully resistant to axial loaded tension forces, but allow some stretch. The collagen fibers are oriented in a wavy parallel fashion and so consequently are flexible and are able to resist unidirectional forces. Dense regular connective tissues include ligaments, tendons, and fascia. Ligaments link bone to bone at joints, while tendons attach bones or cartilage to muscle. Fascia is like a sleeve that covers these structures, binding them together while allowing them to slide smoothly over each other. Fascia can be classified according to its anatomical location, such as superficial fascia, deep fascia, or muscle fascia. as well as visceral or parietal fascia. Dense irregular connective tissue contains a dense woven network of collagen and some elastic fibers in a viscous matrix. The fibers are not parallel to each other and their orientation is very irregular, yet densely packed, giving it the name dense irregular. Dense irregular connective tissue is found in joint capsules, in the connective tissue that envelops muscles or muscle fascia, and it forms the dermis of the skin. It is impact resistant. True elastic connective tissue is rare in the body but can be found in high concentration in several organs, including the aorta and the lungs. The aorta, which carries blood from the heart to the body, contains elastic connective tissue. The aorta, which is a large artery carrying blood from the heart to the body, contains elastic connective tissue. The elastic fibers are very important in helping organs like arteries to retain their shape after they have been distorted by increased volume of blood. The elastic fibers are able to recoil or go back to their original length after being stretched and pull the organ back into its original shape. At a higher magnification, you can identify elastic tissue by its wavy lines of elastic fibers. Fluid connective tissue is the second category of connective tissue. Although it can be difficult to visualize fluids as a connective tissue, which is true in the sense that they are not adding much in the way of physical connection between tissues, however, physiologically they do provide an important connection. The components of fluid connective tissue are blood and lymph. Blood and lymph are involved in transport and body defense. Most of us are familiar with blood and its transport roles in the body. We recognize that blood carries nutrients and oxygen to tissue cells and carries wastes from these cells to the lungs or kidneys for elimination. On the other hand, few of us recognize critical links between blood and lymph fluids in tissue spaces and the specific role of lymph in body homeostasis. The clear fluid in blood is plasma, and the plasma leaks through the blood vessels and enters the interstitial fluid. The plasma carries along with it oxygen that will then diffuse into the cells of the surrounding organs and tissues. The plasma also carries the glucose that the tissues need to survive. Some of the plasma will leak back into the blood capillaries, and some of it will move into the lymphatic vessels that will return the fluid back to the blood near the heart. The fluid in the lymphatic vessels is now called lymph. The lymphatic vessels act as a filter to remove wastes and pathogens as the fluid moves back to the heart. With this system, then, the clear fluid from the blood, called plasma, leaves the blood vessels carrying oxygen and glucose and enters the interstitial space, where it is then called interstitial fluid. The glucose and oxygen enter the nearby cells, and the interstitial fluid re-enters capillaries or lymphatic vessels. The fluid in the lymphatic vessels is then called lymph. The lymph travels back to the heart and is filtered through lymph nodes as it makes its way back to the heart, where it will once again be drained into the blood. In the blood, this fluid is called plasma. These three fluids, plasma, interstitial fluid, and lymph, are the components of fluid connective tissue, and they provide a vital role in homeostasis. The matrix of fluid connective tissue is watery, and much less viscous than the syrupy matrix of connective tissue proper. It carries dissolved proteins and specific cell types. These specific cell types are called formed elements. In the blood, the formed elements include the red blood cells, which are called erythrocytes, the white blood cells, which are called leukocytes, and platelets. The third category of connective tissue is supporting connective tissues. As the name implies, supporting connective tissues are strong and durable tissues that serve as support structures for other types of tissues. Supporting connective tissue includes bone and cartilage. Unlike other tissues, supporting connective tissue has a semi-solid or a solid ground substance within its matrix. The matrix is semi-solid in cartilage and solid in bone. All connective tissues contain protein fibers in their matrix, but in supporting connective tissues, these fibers are often hidden by the semi-solid or solid ground substances. So when learning to identify bone and cartilage, you should look for other criteria besides the presence of visible fibers. In both cartilage and bone, you can see lacunae that are small spaces within the matrix where the cells of bone and cartilage reside. The cells of bone are called osteocytes and the cells of cartilage are called chondrocytes. The lacunae in both tissues occur because after the tissues initially become formed during development, their cells become inactive and its matrix forms small pockets of tissue around them called lacunae. The semi-solid matrix of cartilage and the solid matrix of bone makes it difficult or impossible for the cells to receive nutrients or excrete wastes. We will start by discussing cartilage. Chondrocytes are mature cells found in cartilage. They make up the cellular matrix of cartilage, performing a number of functions within the tissue. including facilitating the exchange of fluids through this thick, viscous matrix. Cartilage lacks vascularization, and so it relies on the exchange of nutrients and waste materials through this syrupy matrix. This is why cartilage doesn't heal well after injury. Fully mature chondrocytes tend to be round, and they may cluster together in small groups within the network of the cartilage. Cartilage contains collagen, elastic, and reticular fibers within its matrix, allowing it to bend easily, yet hard to break. There are 3 types of cartilages: hyaline cartilage, elastic cartilage, and fibrocartilage. Hyaline cartilage is found on many joint surfaces. Hyaline cartilage provides stiff yet flexible support for areas such as the trachea or the sternum. It is also found on the ends of long bones and helps to reduce friction between the bones. The chondrocytes are often grouped together in 2 or more and form a straight outline when in contact with each other. In hyaline cartilage, protein fibers are large and predominantly collagen. The optical density of these fibers is the same as the ground substance surrounding them, and as a result they are not visible within the extracellular matrix. Hyaline cartilage subsequently appears as a very uniform, glossy-type tissue and evenly dispersed chondrocytes in the lacunae. Typically, a dense, irregular connective tissue called perichondrium is found surrounding the hyaline cartilage. Elastic cartilage is a supportive connective tissue, but it bends easily so that when it's distorted, it will return to its original position and shape. It's found in the external ear and the epiglottis. Under the microscope, elastic cartilage is distinguished by the single chondrocytes in lacunae and the fine strands of elastic fibers in the matrix. Fibrocartilage or fibrous cartilage limits movement and prevents bone-to-bone contact. It resists compression and makes a great shock absorber. Fibrocartilage forms the pads in the knee joints. It also is found between the pubic bones at the pubic symphysis. Fibrocartilage also makes up the bulk of the intervertebral discs. Fibrocartilage contains fine collagen fibers arranged in layered arrays. In contrast to the very uniform appearance of hyaline cartilage, fibrocartilage possesses a more open or spongy architecture with gaps between the lacunae and collagen fiber bundles. It is this open, spongy structure that makes fibrocartilage a good shock-absorbing material. It can appear quite different in different locales. Most textbooks show images of fibrocartilage from the intervertebral discs, where it is very open and loose. Bone or osseous tissue is the second type of supporting connective tissue. Bone tissue is different from bones themselves. Bones are organs made up of bone tissue, as well as marrow, blood vessels, epithelium, and nerves, while bone tissue refers specifically to the mineral matrix that forms the rigid sections of the organ. Bone tissue is very strong because it contains calcified calcium salt deposits in its matrix, yet it is flexible because of the collagen fibers arranged in organized layers in the matrix. Bone cells are called osteocytes that are mature, star-shaped bone cells making up 95% of the cells in bone. Osteocytes can live a long time, sometimes for decades, within their lacunae. Compact bone is arranged in concentric circles of matrix around a central canal. The osteocytes within their lacunae are found between the layers of matrix. Canaliculi are small channels that form between the lacunae to allow for the transport of nutrients, gases, and waste products between the cells. Bone tissue is covered by a dense, irregular connective tissue called periosteum. Periosteum covers the bone surfaces, except at the ends, where the bones are covered by the articular cartilage or hyaline cartilage. Periosteum contains an outer fibrous layer where tendons attach and an inner cellular layer that helps with bone growth and maintenance. When identifying bone tissue in compact bone, you would look for the osteon arrangement of concentric circles of matrix surrounding a central canal. The osteocytes and their lacunae are found in a single arrangement between the layers of the matrix called lamellae encircling the central canal. As we finish discussing connective tissue, we must also discuss membranes. Membranes are thin layers of epithelial tissue usually bound to an underlying layer of connective tissue. Membranes cover, protect, or separate other structures or tissues in the body. The 4 types of membranes are cutaneous membranes, serous membranes, mucous membranes, and synovial membranes. The cutaneous membrane is skin. Skin consists of a layer of stratified squamous epithelium, which is the epidermis, firmly attached to a thick layer of dense connective tissue, which is the dermis. It differs from other membranes because it is exposed to air and is dry. The serous membranes consist of simple squamous epithelium supported by a layer of connective tissue, areolar. These moist membranes line the closed internal divisions of the ventral body cavity. The 3 types of serous membranes are the pleura, the peritoneum, and the pericardium. The pleura lines the pleural cavities and covers the lungs. The peritoneum lines the peritoneal cavity and covers the abdominal organs. And the pericardium lines the pericardial cavity and covers the heart. The mucous membranes, or mucosae, consist of epithelial tissue, usually stratified squamous or simple columnar, on a layer of loose connective tissue called the lamina propria, from the Latin meaning one's own layer. The mucous membranes, or mucosa, consist of epithelial tissue, usually stratified squamous or simple columnar epithelia, on a layer of loose connective tissue. The mucosa line the body cavities that open to the exterior, such as the digestive, respiratory, reproductive, and urinary tracts. These membranes are kept moist by bodily secretions. Synovial membranes are composed of connective tissue. They surround the cavity of joints, filling the space with synovial fluid that they make. The synovial fluid lubricates the ends of the bones, allowing them to move freely. This ends Module 3 of Chapter 4, Connective Tissue Proper and Membranes.